Fluttershy's rage-fueled rampage. Butter and blood. Fluttershy sat in her home drinking tea and eating a warm piece of toast with butter and apple jam on it. She loved breakfast. Then again, she pretty much loved everything, so long as it wasn't scary. Like the toaster when the toast popped up, something like that. She finished the crunchy bread with a smile and polished off her tea. It was time to feed the chickens. Humming happily, the yellow Pegasus trotted to her shed where she kept the chickens fed. She placed a hoof on the door handle and pulled it down with a soft creak. The sight inside elicited a gasp from her. All of the items that had been stored on the shelves had fallen. Broken glass jars that held treats for the animals littered the floor. Small garden tools and spilled bags of fertilizer and seed were scattered about. Eyes wide, she surveyed the disaster and knew exactly what happened. She had seen a stray cat prowling the area lately and had yet to deal with him. He must have chased some smaller animal into the shed and caused this utter catastrophe. She huffed angrily, but, just as always, took her anger and buried it deep inside of herself. As she did, she felt something inside break. It wasn't physical, but it was unpleasant. Her heart began racing, but she couldn't understand why. Her breaths came quick, with involuntary growls accompanying each exhale. Her mind flooded with the thoughts of violence. The hair on her back stood on end, a subtle warning to anyone who might see it. Her vision took on a red tint, and finally, she screamed. A rage-filled roar that would send chills down the spines of those near enough to hear it. In reality, it was a soft, high-pitched squeal. And then Fluttershy's equestria knew she was dead. In her place stood a being of pure, unfettered fury. She turned away from her shed and her eyes looked towards Ponyville. She didn't know or care about why or how, but she knew that they would pay. Her wrath would be indiscriminate, directed at any and all who dared to enter her field of vision. The fire burning inside of her was one that could only be extinguished by blood and tears. She began to move, now on a warpath, stomping with light hoof falls that sent up little clouds of dust from the road. There were no ponies on the road before Ponyville as usual, so by the time she reached the town, none had yet fallen under her mercilessness. Then, she saw a stallion coming towards her on the road. The other Fluttershy would have recognized him as Carousel. This Fluttershy did not care. He had a book clutched in his chest with one hoof, with a single purpose in mind. She fixed him with a withering stare and turned herself towards him. Some part in the back of her mind, though, thought, "Oh, you poor, poor stallion." "Good morning, Fluttershy," he said cheerfully as she approached him. There were no words to reply with, as the complete annihilation of this individual would suffice. As she neared him, he tried to turn away to avoid colliding with her, but she turned with him, marching forward with an unstoppable mechanical gait. Time seemed to slow as her body collided with his, bumping him aside, causing his book to fall from his grasp. It was landed on the road with a dramatic thud. "Whoops, my apologies," he said. And then she continued on without apologizing or stopping to pick up his book. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she felt a surge of adrenaline, the raging inferno dying down just a little. Yes, I need more," she thought as she continued into town. From somewhere behind her came a faint, "Have a nice day," and then he was gone, behind her both literally and figuratively, as she set her sights on the rest of Ponyville. Before the main part of town was the bridge over Ponyville Creek, and before that was a house that built directly between her and said bridge. The road gently curved around it, as if literally bending to the will of a mere structure. Old Fluttershy would have made excuses. "I prefer the scenic route anyway," or, "If a pony wants to live there, that's their right." What a shame that current Fluttershy was not given to make such concessions. She did take the road around the house, but not to yield it. She was circling it. A predator stalking injured prey, a preemptive victory lap celebrating its impending demolition. With a wolfish grin, she trotted up to the offending dwelling and looked up and down, sizing it up. Knowing it would be the last time she ever saw it, she said a sarcastic goodbye under her breath, and snickered as she turned around. She leaned her weight onto her forehooves and brought her rear hooves in close to her body, coiled springs ready to be released. Then, with the might of 1,000 butterflies, she kicked the house. She didn't even bother looking back as she walked away. "Uh-huh?" came a mare's voice from behind her. "Oh, hi, Fluttershy." The yellow Pegasus was certain it was some kind of anger-induced hallucination, and she was sure the building, and maybe everything a half a mile beyond, was reduced to rubble. She just kept walking, not even giving it a second glance. It was done, and there was more havoc to cause. Over the bridge, Fluttershy saw the marketplace on her left. It was busy, and there was plenty of potential victims in that direction. She smiled wickedly as she proceeded towards it. She knew what to do. Twisting her face into a horrifying scowl that could wilt daisies, she advanced on the unsuspecting ponies. They'd say, if looks could kill, and hers, she sure could. Smiling, crying, and being afraid were pretty much all she knew how to do. However, so her current face was actually just her normal smile, except without her happy thoughts and silent well-wishing that usually came with it. Needless to say, she left a trail of agony in her wake as she went to the carrot stand. The carrot pony, whose name presently did not matter, was turned away from the counter doing some kind of busy work with the bins of carrots in the back. Next to a display of carrot bundles, there was a bell on the counter meant to let customers get her attention. A terrifying idea came to Fluttershy's mind. Well, terrifying for the carrot pony, not for Fluttershy. She took a bundle of carrots and left 5 bits on the counter, 4 for the carrot plus 1 as a tip, and didn't even ring the bell or say good morning. She was sure it would leave the poor carrot stand owner confused, wondering who bought the carrots while she wasn't looking. It was certain to cause her world to come crashing down on her. Fluttershy briefly considered throwing the carrots on the ground and stopping them to mush, but even in her present stare, there was one creature she truly feared. Angel Bunny without his carrots. The fearful thought cut through her rage like a hot knife through butter, and manifested itself as a shudder. It no longer mattered, however. She had the carrots, she was safe, unlike Ponyville. Next on her list of things to irreparably demolish was whatever was in front of her. It happened to be Carousel Boutique. She made for the dress shop, fiery fury burning anew, and walked right in without knocking, announcing herself. "I don't like the dresses here," she yelled, just above a whisper. Rarity, who was organizing some clothing on a rack, heard this. "You know I agree. I haven't had time to keep up with the latest fashions in between teaching and running my other shops. I really should find the time to," she said as she turned, noticing whoever had said it had already left. She shrugged and turned back to the rack. Fluttershy marched, driven by her bloodlust, her insatiable thirst for carnage and mayhem. She marched. On to the next victim, pony or not, she was ready for anything. "Hi, Fluttershy!" An excited voice came from directly behind her, and she barely even jumped. Ha! She wheeled onto the perpetrator. It was Pinkie Pie. "Hey, so tomorrow's the 16th anniversary of when Thunderlane found that trophy he lost, and I want her. Fluttershy had jammed a hoof into the pink mare's mouth, but she just kept talking. It was time to end this and bring her down several notches into the ground. "I don't have time for that," Fluttershy said, the weight of the words requiring a Herculean effort to lift her from her lungs and past her lips. Pinkie backed her head up, removing the yellow hoof from her mouth. "Okie dokie Loki," she said with a cheerfulness that had just been faked after Fluttershy's ruthless rejection. That the pink mare was even standing after that was a miracle in itself. She pronged away like in sheer terror as Fluttershy fixed her glare that could melt butter. Then it was on to the next target of her wrath. She turned around and saw a mailbox. A mailbox that was soon going to know it was a mistake to be in the path of Fluttershy the Destroyer. Hee. She cackled and pulled back her left forehoof to kick it. As she did, there was a sharp pain in her leg, just above her hoof. Probably nothing, she thought, but looked down anyway just to make sure the mailbox hadn't severed the limb from her body. Nope, it was still there. Same as always, except with a thin splinter of wood pecking from her fetlock, and... was that blood? Light-headed and swaying at the realization, Fluttershy fainted, collapsing onto her side in the soft grass. Fluttershy awoke feeling an odd mix of well-rested and confusion. Grass, wet with dew, pressed against her left side, and she realized that was just how she was lying. A smiling porcelain white face with a pink mane that matched her own filled her view. She recognized that it was Nurse Redheart. "Hey, Fluttershy," she said gently. "How you feeling?" My head," the Pegasus replied, feeling a headache come on. "What happened? Where am I?" "Well, it looked like you bumped into this mailbox here and got yourself a little splinter and passed out. Some pony called me and I came over to bandage it up for you. You were out for maybe 5 minutes?" she explained. "The mailbox?" Fluttershy's eyes widened as memories of the past hour flooded back. The horrific and nightmarish deeds she had done, the shameful cruelty she had subjected Ponyville to. Her face flustered with embarrassment, and she felt a strong desire to leave. I have to go," she said suddenly, standing up on wobbly legs to flee. "Okay, well, be careful," Nurse Redheart said, waving goodbye. Fluttershy thanked her as she galloped away, toward her cottage where she could lament in private. Her run home was panicked, but she made it relatively unnoticed. She ran up the stairs to her bed and leapt face first into her pillow. Then she sobbed deeply, remembering what she had done, and she cried herself out and finally calmed down, and she realized no pony had actually been hurt. Not seriously, anyway, and that made her smile. She then realized what had happened, that her stored anger had built up too much and she exploded, but she was sure it wouldn't happen again. After all, Fluttershy couldn't explode twice. Right?